On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is talkTV.
Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Jeremy Kyle Investigates. Now, our migrant crisis is not going away. Small boats crossing the English Channel have been dominating headlines every week, every month, it seems, for years. In December, Rishi Sunak announced a new plan to tackle illegal immigration, telling MPs we have to stop the boats. But the very next day, a boat carrying migrants capsized off the coast of Kent and 4 people tragically lost their lives. We all hope that 2023 will be a fresh start, that the government would finally clamp down on people smuggling, shutting down the routes that enable illegal immigration to thrive in such inhumane and dangerous ways. But in the first 50 days of this year, more than 2,500 migrants had already arrived on small boats, 1,000 more than by the same point last year. This issue is spiralling out of control, but there has to be an answer. In an exclusive interview with former Australian PM Tony Abbott, we found out how he solved the very same problem. And my panel of experts explore how we got here, what options we have, and what the British public really do think. This is Jeremy Kyle Investigates the Migrant Crisis. Good evening, my friends, and a big welcome to Jeremy Kyle Investigates, where tonight we'll take a closer look at the UK's migrant crisis. Now, this was a photo that stunned me and the rest of the world when we saw it. It was on the front page of almost every single newspaper in late summer 2015. A little boy tragically washed up and lying face down on a Turkish beach. He drowned fleeing war in Syria, floating in the sea between continents that didn't want him. Now, here, the reaction was immediate and kind-hearted, as it always is from the British public. Billions of pounds was raised to help those escaping Syria. This past year, of course, we've opened our hearts and our homes to thousands of Ukrainian refugees escaping Putin's war. We've also rightly welcomed those fleeing the Taliban in Afghanistan and those running in fear from Chinese rule in Hong Kong. Time and time again, we step up. But the truth is, nobody likes to be taken for a mug, and it's pretty clear that our asylum system is now being abused. The number of people arriving on small boats soared to over 40,000 in 2022, and spoiler alert, they weren't all fleeing war-torn countries. Criminal gangs and people smugglers are now running the show, and that has already led to too many in dinghies drowning in the Channel. It's not inconceivable that the image from that Turkish beach could soon be reproduced in Dover. So let's face it, we know this government has completely lost control of illegal crossings. We were promised, weren't we, that leaving the EU meant taking back control of our borders, but nobody anywhere signed up for this mess. The system here isn't just creaking, it's utterly broken. It doesn't work well enough for the genuine refugees who need our help, and it definitely doesn't work for the people of this country who see their local services overwhelmed by immigration and, in some cases, parts of their hometowns overrun. Now, over there, waiting to discuss what's gone wrong in this country and what can be done to fix it, former UKIP leader Henry Bolton, family law barrister Paula Roan Adrian, leading immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson, and our own international editor Isabel Oakeshott, who recently had an exclusive sit-down with Tony Abbott for talkTV. The former Australian PM took dramatic and controversial steps to grip his own country's illegal immigration crisis back in 2013. And Isabel started by asking what he did to fix it.
First of all, you've got to make a decision that as a government, you are not going to allow people to come illegally by boat. And frankly, I think making that decision is the compassionate thing to do, because as long as people are coming illegally by boat, sponsored by people smugglers, you will have a lot of deaths at sea. We think that in the period of the former Labor government, there was at least 1,000 deaths at sea, including some that were particularly tragic, such as when a boat washed up on the rocks at Christmas Island in a storm. So you've got to make the decision that the way is shut. Yeah. And anyone who comes illegally by boat will be removed from the country as quickly as possible. You've got to ensure that the human rights activists can't exploit the courts to keep people endlessly here in limbo. You've got to ensure that that can't be done. Anyone who turns up in a safe country, having moved through a succession of safe countries before coming to what really is their preferred destination, is not a refugee, is not an asylum seeker. They are would-be economic migrants, and they should not be able to claim asylum. They should not get the protection of the courts.
So much more to come from that exclusive, but Tony Abbott was very clear, wasn't he? Stopping illegal boat crossings is the compassionate thing to do. Isabel Oakeshott, you spoke to Tony Abbott. Do you agree?
Absolutely. And I think that listening to those clips, the vast majority of British voters would be cheering on that approach. Look, it's not compassionate to encourage people to make that perilous journey. We have already seen boats going down in the Channel. It is not compassionate to encourage people who could easily be finding refuge from whatever it is they're fleeing from, if they really are fleeing from anything, in this country where, frankly, they may be left really doing very little for a year or more. We know this because the system is broken, stuck in some probably pretty shabby hotel or B&B with very little to live on. They're not allowed to work. How is that compassionate?
Henry, you've worked in politics, and the Australian immigration policy is discussed a lot over here, isn't it?
It is.
Did it used to be frowned upon? Is it now not frowned upon? Have things changed because of the desperation we find ourselves in?
You know, we've got a polarised response to this, haven't we? I mean, I personally think that Tony Abbott's spot on. And I think that in the UK, we've got a problem that we've got a government that, in your introduction, you talked about, you know, we expected to be able to take back control of our borders when we left the European Union. The European Union actually was meant and did give the power to the politicians in Westminster, to the British government, to do what he is saying. They've failed to do it. And we've got this polarisation in society where actually the vast, as Isabel says, the majority of the British population see this as chaos. The whole thing, the people smuggling, the risk to the migrants, and in fact, then they're also being exploited. They're not just only trying to exploit the British economy, they're being exploited by the people smugglers as well.
Yeah.
We see all of this and we see the accommodation problem. And people are sick and tired of it. And all it does is demonstrate that the British government simply is not capable at the moment of getting a grip of any of these things. And so, where we are, we've got this silent majority of the population who want this dealt with, but then we've got a minority that are highly vocal, prepared to criticise and condemn very loudly. And for some reason, they seem to get traction, and our politicians are frightened of them.
Henry,
That's how I interpret it.
It's not a minority. We're talking about worldwide criticism here. Come on. It's not just about minority. Next, you're going to tell me it's my fellow lefty brethren who are to blame.
Well, I think it's probably is actually
a failed government policy.
Can I bring Ivan in? Because I want to do this slowly, because in Jeremy Kyle Investigates, I want to dissect this. I want to do a deep dive, because we touch upon this almost every night. We've got a whole hour to discuss this. Ivan, let's just, you're an immigration lawyer. Chaos is a great word that Henry Bolton used. It's a chaotic mess. I hear day in, day out, the Home Office is not fit for purpose. Everybody's being exploited. What's your response from a legal point of view to Tony Abbott's suggestion?
Well, firstly, the laws in Australia, they don't allow a refugee to claim asylum. The majority of people coming across the Channel are genuine refugees.
This is my problem, and we've got an hour. The majority. Nobody can give me a specific number. I will sit here forever and listen to all.
They tell us that 80% of the claims that are made for asylum, and I'm sure I'll be correct.
Right. Well,
80% of the claims are successful.
But that
doesn't necessarily mean they're genuine.
That they are legitimate.
There you are.
If you look at the level of training of the people who are processing these claims, for example, I'm going to take, it's quite a high-profile example, but the situation of Albania and Albanians.
Yes.
OK? Albania, NATO member state, member of the European Council, in accession talks to join the European Union, member of the Organisation of Security and Cooperation in Europe. It's all of these things. You've got universal health care and so on in Albania. Yes, it's a poor country. These are economic migrants. They have no legitimate claim to asylum in this country, but they're being granted it.
The problem we face with small boats coming from France is just like the problem that Australia faced with small boats arriving from Java. And here's how Prime Minister Abbott told Isabel he fixed it. Watch this.
We turned boats back to Java because that was where the overwhelming majority of these boats had initiated. Given that they'd come from Java, we sent them back to Java, and if the people smugglers tried to scuttle their boats, we would take people temporarily on board Australian government vessels, take them to within Kui of Indonesia's territorial waters, put them on an unsinkable orange life raft and send them back to Java. And I knew that we were about to win this particular battle when early in 2014, on the front page of Australia's biggest selling newspaper, there was a photograph of a big orange life raft washed up on a beach in Java. The people on it had arrived perfectly safely back to the place from which they'd set out, but that sent a massive message to all of the would-be illegal migrants to Australia. You cannot come, because if you invest $10,000 or whatever it is with a people smuggler, you'll just end up back where you started. And that was really the beginning of our complete success here.
It's interesting, Isabel. I go back to remembering those times, and people were horrified, and yet he made the point that it was greeted with initial scepticism, but then joy almost by Australians. And I want to paint the picture of what's happening right here, right now. We sit here and we talk about, you know, it's all not fit for purpose. Do we not need, perhaps, something as seemingly outrageous as what Abbott did 8 years ago to deal with a problem that won't go away?
100% we need that. You know, it isn't outrageous to protect your territorial integrity. It isn't outrageous to send people who are taking an illegitimate route, who probably, in many cases, don't have a legitimate claim to asylum, to send them safely back where they came from, which is France, which isn't too dangerous. And the point he's making there, as a government, is that you have to mean it. It's no good endlessly telling voters that you're going to get on top of it, acknowledging that it's not good enough, it's not fit for purpose, and nothing ever actually happening.
What's worrying is we're making assessments on people's asylum claims without hearing them.
But Mike, can I jump in for a second? I absolutely understand that, and I know our laws are different on pushing back boats. I said already maybe we should change the law. But where you sit and you say we're making assumptions,
yes,
the people coming here are taking advantage of a law that allows them to take the mickey and disappear into our society. So why isn't our law stronger?
Are we in the convention or are we out?
What is the convention?
Well,
because
look,
we seem to be...
Tony Abbott, that policy is unlawful. Within the convention, Article 33 prohibits refoulement. And what that means is you cannot send somebody back to a country where there's a reasonable risk that they will suffer irreparable harm.
Right, so let's just cover that. What's the irreparable harm of going back to Albania that's not a war-torn country? And with respect, Tony Abbott's policy worked.
Nothing wrong with that. They can absolutely go back. In fact, Albania has been on the white list since 2004. So the laws are already here to return Albanians. The problem's not, is the law there to do that? The problem is we're not doing it quick enough.
Remember, we tried the turnaround policy. It wasn't about the law, it was about the disgust that people had for the proposal, OK? Nobody wanted to do it. We know that the Navy didn't want to do it. We know that the Army didn't want to do it. We know that nobody wanted it.
It's not quite
correct.
correct.
It's a disgusting policy
it's not
that
quite correct.
everyone found abhorrent.
It's not
and
quite
nobody
correct.
wanted to do it.
If I may say, that's not quite correct. The reason that there was a problem there was because there was no safe technique to do it. And actually, whilst I agree absolutely in the situation that Tony Abbott and the Australians found themselves in, that worked. We have to bear in mind that we're talking about different types of vessels now moving migrants, and therefore there are different sort of risk scenarios in terms of turning them back. Casting a dinghy adrift or a life raft adrift in the Channel, the prevalent wind is going to blow them towards the UK, not away in the currents. So you've got a number of different things there, but it's not beyond the wit of man to do it.
So From the first part, we ascertain that everybody around the table, and in fact in the country, understands absolutely that the system is broken and something needs to be done. But it's how you do that. So next on JK Investigates, the domestic backlash that Tony Abbott had to ride out to see his policy through. Plus, we'll speak to Sir Roger Gale, the Tory MP whose constituents include those moved into the infamous Manston Migrant Centre. We're coming back in 3.
Dearly beloved, let us pray. Yeah, careful. Who are you praying to exactly?
Rishi is like some kind of submarine prime minister. He isn't making the case. You're making the case here now.
I think you did kill these women.
Yes.
They need justice.
We're done.
You did kill them, didn't you?
Tell you what, we're all racist, we're all sexist, we're all homophobe. Bandalila.
History is littered with a long line of lovable but angry men.
I'm as bad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore! I'm gonna give you a damn good thrashing! Finally, my stupidity pays off! I don't believe it!
But one man rises above them all.
What just happened?
Passionate and always straight to the point. World-class broadcaster Vanessa Feltz is on talkTV every night of the week. From politics to pop culture, there's no subject she shies away from. And remember,
if you're thinking about it, we're talking about it.
Join Vanessa Feltz on talkTV every day from 4 p.m.
Welcome, my friends, to Jeremy Kyle Investigates. Now, the rights and wrongs of what needs to be done to solve the migrant crisis in this country are always hotly debated. Now, one man who knows more about this topic than most is Sir Roger Gale, MP for North Thanet, home of the Manston Asylum Processing Centre, which has been in the news so much of late. Sir Roger, welcome to the show. Do we lack the leadership, the will, the finance or the resolve in this country to do something constructive and get this problem sorted?
No, we don't lack the will, but it's only going to be solved long term by international agreement. First of all, bilaterally with the French, and then on a pan-European basis. And by a pan-European basis, I don't just mean the European Union. I mean countries such as Turkey as well. And unless and until we understand that, we're not going to begin to solve the problem. It's all very well for Mr. Abbott to say, we did this, or for the supporters of Mr. Bolton's party to say, send them back. But we in this country abide by international law, and under international law, you can't just send them back. And indeed, Isabel Oakeshott knows that as well. So we have to start to get real about this and be grown up about it. And I happen to think, although I I'm not his greatest fan, that Rishi Sunak has taken a grown-up decision to talk to Monsieur Macron and to reach the early stages of an agreement that is already bearing fruit. Now, that's only the first tentative step. We've got to go a lot further. But it is a step in the right direction rather than a step in the wrong dog whistle direction.
So, Roger, Manston, obviously the facility, the processing facility in the press so much over the last few weeks, it's on your patch. Just for people watching, for some explanation, why did things spiral out of control? How bad was it?
For the first 9.5 months, from January of this year right through until mid-September, the Manston Processing Centre worked extremely well, was humane, efficient, people were well cared for, well looked after, documented and moved on. You need to understand the purpose of Manston was to take the pressure off the port of Dover, and indeed on the quayside at Dover, where people were literally lying in the rain on the ground, move them to a facility where they could be processed, fingerprinted, have their biometrics taken, details taken, checked for possible terrorist activity or previous criminal records where that was possible, and then moved on to alternative accommodation. It was never intended to be a permanent residence for anybody at all. What actually happened, and there's a dispute about this, so I need to flag that up, but what actually happened, in my view, is that the incoming Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, took a policy decision not to sign off any additional accommodation. And within days, there was a backlog. Mrs. Braverman resigned briefly. Grant Shapps took over briefly as Home Secretary and began to reverse the process and unblock the system. Mrs. Braverman came back into office and the block came on again. The result of that was that Robert Jenrick and I, the Minister of State at the Home Office, and I found ourselves on a Sunday in the pouring rain, in the dark, at Manston, with 4,500 people in a facility that was designed to take 1,500. It should never have happened. It needn't have happened. And now that we've got the situation back on track, the system is once again working as it was supposed to and properly.
Right, Sir Roger, just stay there if you would be so kind. Henry Bolton, called out there by Sir Roger, saying you don't really understand what you're talking about. Your response?
I know. I mean, I've helped the government's cabinet level in 14 countries to sort out strategic border problems. And I would say that Sir Roger Gale is the one who's being rather simplistic about this and needs to grow up. The reality is that Manston was ill-conceived at the beginning. Manston was built and established with the expectation that this was a temporary problem. The analysis behind it was appalling. The execution of the implementation of it was not good, and nor was it sustainable. And we now find ourselves with a problem. Now, we're talking about the hotels as well. Let's bridge across to that. As Sir Roger says, quite rightly in this case, that Manston was designed only as a temporary holding and an assessment screening centre, if you like, before putting people in hotels. However, you've got to look at the fact that now the hotel capacity is pretty much taken up. There's a big pushback now on further hotels being occupied by the Home Office. And so you've got a complex series of problems that, quite frankly, had there been a strategic plan from the beginning, fully integrated.
Can I just bring Sir Roger Gale back in to respond to that? Sir Roger, just briefly. Henry Bolton says we can do it. Tony Abbott proved it can work, and you say we can't. What's the answer? Because the British people, not me, not the people around this desk, and not you, sir, the British people are fed up. Who's to blame, and how do we get this right?
I'm not interested in the blame game. I spelled out fairly clearly how we get it right. It has to be done by international agreement.
OK.
I noticed that Mr. Bolton, for all his bluster, has not said, yes, we can send them back to France, because he knows, and I know, and everybody on your panel knows that legally you cannot do that.
Jumping, go on.
Let's see if we agree on this. Let's see if we agree on this, OK? Number one, we need a legitimate pathway for those asylum seekers to make their claims. Number two...
We're starting in the wrong place there.
Number two, we know, and I'm the only one who's going to say it, that Brexit has played a part. Because we know that in 2018, we had something like 229 people crossing the Channel. Right. And now we have over 40,000. And we hear
nothing
Sir
to do
Roger
with
saying
Brexit.
very clearly
Not
we need international...
Hold on, Isabel Oakeshott, that's Macron. Excuse me, Henry, wait, speak.
Paula, I mean, to blame Brexit is just absolutely ludicrous.
I throw it out there, Isabel.
There is a complete naivety here. I was quite shocked to hear Sir Roger talking about, you know, in praiseworthy terms about the tentative steps that are being taken with Emmanuel Macron. Give me a break. The public do not want tentative steps. They want a solution now.
Sir Roger, respond to Isabel if you'd be so kind.
Yeah, quite simply, I'm afraid Miss Oakeshott is being, as many journalists are, because they're playing to the gallery, simply populist. We know what the public want. We know what the public are saying.
But we have to deliver it.
The reality is that in international law, you cannot do it. You know that, and to say anything else is disingenuous.
What I would say is that sometimes the law may need to be tested.
Sir Roger Gale, thank you, as ever. Now, listen, this is also... I've also been speaking to Claire Mosley, founder of Care for Calais, a charity that provides all manner of support for refugees here and in northern France. And she explained what life is really like for asylum seekers awaiting the processing of their application. Have a look at this.
Because of the massive delays in processing people's asylum claims, we have so many people now living in all kinds of different hotel accommodation, and that can vary from large hotels with hundreds of people in right down to tiny bed and breakfast across the UK. Because of these big backlogs, it's pushing all the way back to places like Manston where they first arrived. I believe we need to get people's claims processed. They came here to start for safety, they came here to start their lives, they want to be part of our communities and contributing to our society. But while they're waiting, they can't do that. They can't get jobs, they can't move forward, they don't have any certainty. So we absolutely need to process those claims, let them get on with their lives, let them be part of our communities. That's what they want. And it'd be so much better for us. We don't want to have all these people living in hotels. We don't need to have the cost of them living in hotels. If we process their claims, it would solve their problems and ours. It's the obvious thing to do.
If I can bring Ivan in, Claire is saying it's not working for anybody. If you just all give me, because I'm getting old, right? Here's the thing. I listened to Sir Roger Gale, I listened to Isabella, I listened to Paula, isn't it? The system isn't working. You and Sir Roger Gale go, under international law, we can't send them back. Well, I would love somebody in immigration law or Sir Roger Gale or somebody to look down the camera and say to the British people, this is what I say to Claire Mosley, the British people who have paid tax and insurance for years, who cannot afford to heat their homes, they are screaming at their television, Ivan, going, for God's sake, change the law. And it might sound really unfair, but we right now, you're shaking your head. The British people are up in arms.
We need buy-in from the French. Okay?
Well, look, we've been trying to get that for years.
If you let me finish, we need buy-in from the French.
Yeah.
We can't send them back to a country that doesn't want to receive nothing.
But, right, stop. There, we've done it. My mother-in-law is going to be so proud of me. Why the bloody hell, if France don't want them, should we be the ones that have them?
Two reasons. We have obligations under the United Nations Convention on the Laws of the Sea. That's number one. So if there's somebody who's on a dinghy, we have a positive obligation to rescue them.
We don't have an obligation to take them to
Is that why they get on a dinghy?
We can choose not to. We can actually say, we don't want to rescue you. We can do that. Or we can have safe ways of pushing them back.
All right, you know you said safe way. If you create a safe way, and I've listened to all of that, it is not war-torn Albania, right? So you're going to tell me, well, they've got relatives here. I'm going to tell you I've got no relatives in Albania. I understand that some people have to come to this country. When I started the show, I talked about the people from Hong Kong and Afghanistan and Syria and what this country did for Ukraine. I'm just asking you if you understand the British people's frustration at a really difficult time.
I do. And let me answer the question, because this frustration is being pushed, is being focused to the wrong people. The frustration that you are feeling and that the British public are feeling is all being focused on 40,000 migrants that have made a very dangerous journey to start a new life.
Very foolish journey.
Why is that? Why is it your focus, your anger, your frustration because you're hungry, because you're cold, why is that being focused on the migrants?
Who should it be focused on?
Why isn't it being focused on our government,
Yeah.
who have failed their people? OK, this government has failed our children, it's failed the students, it's failed those who want to be bricklayers and plumbers and scaffolders, it's failed them, it's failed the teachers. It's failed those who are running small businesses in the hotels and those around the areas that see the influx
Paula,
of migration.
you could go on and on and on with a list of failures.
So who is to blame for that, Isabel?
Well, I think...
It's not
very
the person
quickly, and I've got to
who's
go to a break.
fleeing.
Okay.
It's not the person who's fleeing, Jeremy, that's to blame.
And actually, voters don't just blame the person who's fleeing. They 100% do blame the government. Well, look at where the Tories are in the polls at the moment. They will be punished for this, without a doubt.
Indeed.
Interesting. Listen, next on JK Investigates, with the British public, as I said, struggling to heat their homes. Are illegal migrants really dining at the Ritz? I'll be speaking with a Kent Hotel, ready for this? Kent Hotel owner to find out the truth behind the headlines. We're coming right back.
Dearly beloved, let us pray. Yeah, careful. Who in Ukraine too, exactly?
Rishi is like some kind of submarine prime minister. He isn't making the case. You're making the case here now.
I think you did kill these women.
No, sir.
They need justice.
We're done.
You did kill them, didn't you?
Tell you what, we're all racist, we're all sexist, we're all homophobe. Bandalila.
History is littered with a long line of lovable but angry men.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore. I'm gonna give you a damn good thrashing. Finally, my stupidity pays off. I don't believe it.
But one man rises above them all.
What just happened?
Passionate and always straight to the point. World-class broadcaster Vanessa Feltz is on talkTV every night of the week. From politics to pop culture, there's no subject she shies away from. And remember,
If you're thinking about it, we're talking about it.
join Vanessa Feltz on talkTV every day from 4 p.m. This is talkTV.
Thank you very much indeed, my friends. Welcome back. You're watching JK Investigates, considering Britain's migrant crisis from every conceivable angle. Now, more now from Isabel's exclusive interview with former Australian PM Tony Abbott. We've already discussed his plan to deal with small boats. The million-dollar question now is what happened next and whether that policy, and it was frowned upon by many, actually worked. Take a look at this.
It just doesn't happen anymore. It just doesn't happen anymore. There are said to be thousands of people in Java who went to Indonesia hoping to get a ride on a leaky boat to Australia, but there was a flurry of activity at the time of the change of government, but to its credit, the Albanese government has meticulously adhered to the Abbott and subsequent coalition government's policies.
And this is a relatively new left-wing administration, and they're not talking about unravelling what you did.
That's correct. That's correct. I mean, while they said that what we were doing was wrong, it was illegal, it was impossible, it wouldn't work, we demonstrated that it did work, and they've completely changed their mind.
Can I just, because during the break, we're going to talk about with a man who owns a hotel in a sec, but can we just talk about Article 33, because we've sort of hung it over, right? So you're the immigration lawyer. Article 33, as this idiot believes, says that we can't send people back, right?
Yes.
My question to you, Mr. Immigration Lawyer, is if this country is creaking at its knees and the British public are struggling, why don't we revoke that article and just get rid of it and be as strong as Australia was and sort this for once and for all?
Because it's part of the Refugee Convention. So you can't pick and choose parts of a treaty you don't like. We actually drafted the treaty. It was English lawyers who drafted it. And it has essential protection. What Article 33 says, it protects individuals from a return to a country where there's a reasonable risk that they will suffer irreparable harm.
But France
is not that place. Look, I hear you, and your hand wringing.
We can't send them to France. We're talking about returning them back to their own country.
Why can't we send them to France?
Because the French won't have them.
I hear you.
Oh, but that's the frustration of the British people, so why should we have them?
Henry and Isabel said that the Brexit had nothing to do with it. Well, it did. Because before Brexit, we were members...
It was all going great, wasn't it?
The Dublin Convention.
No, I have to come in there because in 2017, 18 and 19, under Dublin 3, this country had to take more transfers in from EU member states than we were able to transfer out. Dublin 3 created a situation where we got more people. And the other thing is that because this is a common misconception, that Dublin 3 enabled us to send people back to France.
You're reading the wrong books, my friend.
Dublin 3...
we were returning people to France under Dublin Convention. That was the law.
Dublin...
Prior to Brexit.
One sec, Isabel.
Can I just...
Isabel Oakeshott, over to you.
Can I just come in here? Look, the British public do not frankly give a crap about Dublin 3 or Article 33. They don't know what that is.
We play ping-pong with refugees, do we? Do we that with the French? They ping them over here, we ping them back.
Perhaps we have to.
Is that the answer? I don't think
perhaps
so.
We have. You know what the absolute...
What the British
do you know what
public
the
need to be aware
absolute
of
beauty
is the truth. And the truth is not that we are creaking at the knees because of immigrants.
Paula,
that's where we need to start with, Jeremy. That is a misconception that is being absolutely pushed.
So why are people in this country struggling then?
They are
because they're visible, that's why, Jeremy. It was on the lorries before. We didn't see them.
To be fair,
that's the difference.
To be fair, people are struggling for all manner of reasons at the moment. Everything from the Euro...
You think the migrants are getting blamed out of all...
Of course they are. It's cheap, it's easy, and it's what's always happened. Look at the colour of my skin, Jeremy. Come on. It's what's always happened. It's boring and it's simplistic.
But migrants are just one part of the whole mosaic as to why the country's got difficulties.
That's true.
And I think
what a wonderful moment to prove that this hasn't been thrown together and, in fact, is an investigation, sorted down under, but then over here, unable to properly house the numbers surging in, the UK government has now taken to filling up hotels all over the country with newly arrived migrants. You've got to watch this. Richard Martin, the owner of the Blazing Donkey Hotel in Sandwich in Kent, is one of those the government approached. Richard, welcome to Jeremy Kyle Investigates. Just tell my lovely panel and the people of Great Britain what the British government offered you, a hotel owner, my friend.
Well, they approached us and offered to book our entire hotel for a 12-month contract period at very healthy rates, which would have decimated my business overnight, frankly.
How much did they offer you?
Very offended, and the figure, if you ran it through the numbers through based on the occupancy, was 1,080,000, and we're a relatively small country hotel just outside of Sandwich, as you say, in Kent.
So, at the risk of being hit by the lady on my left or right, whichever way you're looking, what would the good people of Sandwich have thought if your hotel had suddenly become full of migrants?
Well, I've been rather shocked with the traction my speaking out has gained, because when I go to fill the car up at the local gas station, when I go to the local store, wherever I go, people are stopping me to say, thanks for, standing up to this and saying what's right. And what's right for us is, don't let the government decimate your business and force you to lay off up to 50 staff in the high season. Don't let the government make you close your business and upset over 200 brides and grooms that have got their weddings booked here. So for me, I never realised how much feeling was out there. I've heard it from your panel earlier, but it's been absolutely staggering. So I didn't intend to speak out to gain this traction. It just so happened that everyone feels the same as we do. And there needs to be a better plan and a more practical one to solve this. And from what I've heard, it doesn't seem to be any closer to getting to that point.
I think that's a really good point, Richard. Thank you very much indeed. Panel, let's talk now about the government. There's a really good example. He's saying they offered him £1 million
Why don't you let them work? Let them work. Let them pay for their own accommodation. Why are we not letting these...
Because that will only encourage
the
more.
The US allows refugees to work.
If you process their applications very quickly, then you wouldn't have that problem.
So we're back there to the Home Office and the fact that the system doesn't process. So if we had a system that was fit for purpose and process these applications quickly, not send them to Rwanda or put them in hotels where they can't work and all of that and offered money to people. So the next thing is we go back to the government, the Home Office. I've sat here and every night people say it's not fit for purpose. Well, whose bloody fault is that?
Well, we've got no institutional training in the Immigration Service or Border Force. All of their training is undertaken either on online modules or in, ironically, hotel meeting rooms and the odd sort of meeting room in a Border Force office. OK, it is incoherent. And actually, by the way, this has happened with the police as well, since the regional police training colleges were all closed down about 10, 12 years ago. It's one of the problems we've got with the police. There's no institutional training. It's incoherent. So the people who are actually undertaking these or doing the processing themselves...
They're not qualified.
Are not really qualified. I wouldn't qualify them.
The decisions are poor.
And how long is this?
I'll give you an example.
Is this a Tory thing? Is this more than 12 years or is it...
I had a decision yesterday, the wrong name. So the wrong name was on the actual
decision. You don't surprise me at all.
They're using templates.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. And then the appeal system...
And that will be replicated right across
There's nobody there for the Home Office. So I go to court, the judge is there, I'm there, nobody's there from the Home Office.
I mean, that's ridiculous, isn't it?
It's outrageous.
So what you're saying is, what we're coming round to in the right way is, you're saying that we shine a light on migrants, which is unfair because there are lots of other problems. But if we do address the whole situation and people's frustration, which is natural, it might be misplaced, but it's natural, is that we have no system. So if we talk about why do we have a processing system that is so rubbish, Paula? What is that about?
It's quite simple. It's lack of funding.
Oh, I don't think it's always lack of funding. It's poor management. I mean, look, Paula, this government has taken a 70-year high of tax from the population. So there's not a lack of funding.
Well,
there is a total shambles.
All sorts of nonsense. If they put it into immigration,
I would say that there is an absolute beauty to the turn back the boats policy and the meaning it policy, which is that once you start doing it, you only have to do it for a very short period of time.
So you break the law for a short period of time.
Goes. I would like to know from you.
Government before, though,
I would like to know from you.
I
would like to know from you. Please, can you tell people, because they would want to know this, what exactly would be the consequences of breaking the law in this case, of the UK standing up for its integrity of its own borders?
Putting our morals to one side.
It's a very interesting question. You're actually
90%
I want to know what the consequences
international
are.
Contracts under English law. Do you know why? Because we uphold the law. The reason people want to claim asylum here and not France, because we comply with the law. That is the look.
Perhaps in some cases we need to
Can I ask a
test
question
it.
and then I must go to a break? It's fascinating, this, and I mean it. And I'm not criticising France. Obviously, I wouldn't. We uphold the law, they don't. Do you think the people who are coming from not war-torn countries to Great Britain, whether or not it's because the system's rubbish or they've got family or they haven't, is it because we're so good and we're so straight/so weak, hear me out, so confused, so muddled? Are we a soft bloody touch, is what I'm asking?
No, we comply with the law. We're fair. That's the British way. That is what we do. We don't want to be like the French.
But
we don't want to be like Australians, do we?
You know what parliamentary sovereignty means?
Yeah.
It means that primacy rests with Parliament.
And protecting our own
not
borders.
with the courts. Parliament writes the laws. The courts then judge according to the law, OK? Now, obviously. Now, the problem here is that we've got a parliament that doesn't know how to legislate in the right way. And the reason they don't is because...
No, the way that you want it, Henry.
No,
let's be fair.
No.
You're here because you don't want these people here.
Look, it's up to the government what happens. What we all know is that the government has not secured and managed our borders correctly. Now, it's not only immigrants. We've got an explosion of cocaine and heroin, both of which are imported. About 95% of all the illegally held firearms in this country are imported. Our borders are insecure.
Yeah.
Now,
I've got 10 seconds, Henry, go.
Appoint a national coordinator for borders, a working group, cross-government, cross-agencies, start developing a strategy. In the meantime, there are certain things, some of which have been mentioned now, where we can actually start to hammer them now.
What?
We were connected.
He's making a job
breakfast.
application.
We
That's
were
what he's
scouting
for a job. That's why.
I'll do it.
I will say one thing. I think it's astonishing that the government hasn't worked this out. I'm learning so much. Next on JK Investigates, we've heard the arguments from all sides, but what does the public really think about all of this? I'll be chatting with a polling guru and reading out some of your thoughts next on JK. We're coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
Dearly beloved, let us pray. Yeah, careful. Who in Ukraine too, exactly?
Rishi is like some kind of submarine prime minister. He isn't making the case. You're making the case here now.
I think you did kill these women.
No, sir.
They need justice.
We're done.
You did kill them, didn't you?
Tell you what, we're all racist, we're all sexist, we're all homophobe. Bandalila.
History is littered with a long line of lovable but angry men.
I'm as bad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore. I'm gonna give you a damn good thrashing. Finally, my stupidity pays off. I don't believe it.
But one man rises above them all.
What just happened?
Passionate and always straight to the point. World-class broadcaster Vanessa Feltz is on talkTV every night of the week. From politics to pop culture, there's no subject she shies away from. And remember,
If you're thinking about it, we're talking about it.
join Vanessa Feltz on talkTV every day from 4 p.m.
Welcome back to the final part of a special JK Investigates focusing on Britain's migrant crisis. Now, there are no easy answers to this, and the arguments rage on all sides about what needs to be done to fix this crisis. But what do the British people think? Isabel and Paul are still with me. I'm also joined by author of Bloody Foreigners, the story of immigration to Britain, Robert Winder, and the director of Delta Poll, Joe Twyman. Let's start with you, Joe, right? We've got an election in just under 2 years. The Tories are on the rack. Most people would admit that immigration is a massive, massive issue. What do the numbers say? What do we know are the facts here?
Well, actually, most people don't think it's a massive issue. Only around 1 in 5 people says that it's in their top 3 issues facing the country. When you ask them what's the most important issue facing them and their families, it drops right back. And so that does change over time, and indeed it can go up and down and may well rise with events such as the announcement of the number of immigrants we've had over the last year and things like that. But it's very much a third-order issue. It's there with the environment. It's not there with the NHS and the economy, and it's certainly nowhere near there with the cost of living crisis, which for many people remains the only game in town.
Are we in such a place, and I'd love to bring you in now, Sir Robert, are we now in a place where a country that is known to help the genuine people, and we want to help the genuine people, is being overshadowed because the system's on its backside?
Maybe, and it's a dangerous place, because I think historically you're all right. Britain has been really a tremendous haven for migrants throughout history. In the 19th century, we didn't turn away a single foreigner. And it's one of the great sources of our strength. And even in modern times, when migration is a hot issue and has been for a while, it's still clear that it's demonstrably superb for Britain to have high levels of migration. I think a third of our Nobel Prize winners were born abroad. Something like 2/3 of the Sunday Times rich list were born abroad.
But how do you marry to that people watching who are struggling and, for whatever reason, whether it's 40,000 or not, are increasingly angry that people who say we're coming from war-torn countries when they're coming from France, right, are seemingly, again, I use the word, right, if you sat in your house up north, where I used to be, and you can't heat your house and you can't feed your kids, you might all smile around this table, but you're going to look at those people in a hotel costing this government 5 or 6 million a day, and it's going to do your head in.
Oh, I think we marry it by saying that although the situation that's there at the moment in the Channel is disastrous, and the government should clearly address it more swiftly, more speedily, more efficiently, and all the things that you've been discussing, we need to calm things down a little bit by remembering that, of course, we have a cost of living crisis, but the cost of living crisis in southern Sudan is a lot worse.
But most of these people are not from
I
southern
know.
Sudan. And look, you said about a lot of migrants coming here being good for the economy, but we've got to be realistic.
Yes.
This is not a huge country. We've already added masses to the populations, millions and millions and millions. You look at Australia, the irony there, that they're turn the boats back policy. Australia has about a fraction of the UK's population. I think it's about 20 million, something like that, and a much bigger landmass. We have to be realistic about what our infrastructure can actually cope with.
We also have to be realistic, and that's, I think, what you were asking, about the possible reputational damage that it causes to the British brand for us to seem, after centuries of being welcoming, hospitable, law-abiding and receptive, and you're right to mention the people's response to Ukrainian refugees and Syrian refugees is very heartening. Often the government's response and often the media's response isn't.
Can bring you back in, Joe. You talked about the electorate and it was sort of top 3 or 5. What about Tory voters specifically? Because if you read any poll, it says the Tories are going to be wiped out. Richard Tyers tells me every day they're going to end up with nothing.
Yeah, it's certainly more important for them. In fact, it's in their top 3, particularly among those who voted Conservative at the last election and Leave in the EU referendum. So among the type of voters that the Conservatives need to hold on to if they're going to get close to a majority next year, yes, it is important. But it's also worth remembering that among that group, they tend to believe that neither the Conservatives nor Labour, nor indeed anyone within the established political system, has the correct answers as they would see it.
See, that's really interesting. And I'm back there, Paula. The British public don't think that any political party has the answer. Why?
Because, unfortunately, there have just been so many failures in terms of the immigration policy.
Not the people, when I say why, actually. I mean, why the hell hasn't some politician in the last however many years had the gumption to be able to sort it out?
Because they're afraid of people like these two going on and on about, well, less you, I'm going to go with you. Going on and on about Article 33 or whatever it was, Convention Z, I don't know.
I know nothing about those articles, but I don't think it's
I
that.
unfairly maligned you there.
I'm not even sure it's actually a broken system, which you've talked about a lot. We've almost arrived at a place which is deliberate, which is that we've set the bar very high. So we have 40, 50,000 people coming across the Channel, which is disastrous. We're quite lightly brushed. France has double the number, Germany much more. For goodness sake, there's 3.5 million in Turkey in refugee camps.
Rather
we can't
bigger
get here.
Place.
Our museum, we had a little exhibition on refugees from the Sangatte refugee camp in Calais, and 75% of them are university graduates. So I think criminalising them, demonising them, we do perhaps more damage than we solve.
I was told last week that we need migrants to fulfil jobs that aren't available. I then say, and I quote, right, that there are 2.5 million people unemployed in this country.
There's a lot more than that.
Sorry, I don't mean to jump in. To which somebody said they're all mentally ill or disabled.
Oh, what
now,
nonsense.
I would like to suggest, without being slaughtered, that that's nonsense. And I would like to suggest that the efforts should be made that maybe 1 million of those 2.5 million got off their backside and went and did the jobs that apparently we can only fill by people getting on a dinghy and coming. I don't understand that at all.
Wouldn't disagree with that, and the margins are very important. But, I mean, if immigration were a problem, America wouldn't be a superpower. It's very clear that it promotes economic dynamism, cultural creativity,
within
all of
limits.
the good things.
And if you are importing people who are highly skilled and whose labour or expertise you actually need, but actually we don't need people to fill low-skilled jobs here. We've got 1 in 8 people of working age on out-of-work benefits. Hello, what? I mean, it doesn't stack up.
But that's our own political problem, and I agree with that.
Good.
We started this by saying that it wasn't fit for purpose. We were promised to have control of our borders. We talked about Tony Abbott, a policy, you interviewed him, that went down like a lead balloon in Australia, but actually very quickly, let me finish, very quickly not only worked, but the Labour Party, who gave it both barrels, have adopted it and it works. But, as he said, a lot of people are against that. I'm going to ask you all to sum up. What is the answer? You're in charge.
I didn't hear in Isabel's interview about how Tony Abbott and his government was also sued for $70 million in terms of compensation for those that he did ship to Papua New Guinea and to the other
Java.
And to Java, and
how
also
much did they actually pay, Paula?
And also that 12 of those asylum seekers lost their lives.
How much did he actually?
I didn't hear about that. I didn't hear about that in the interview.
Paula, how much did they actually pay? They may have been sued for any number of trillions. How much did they pay?
I understand the figure was 70.
You don't
$70 million.
That's what they actually paid, or what they were
That's
sued
what I
for?
understand the figure was for.
I think we need to check that out.
We can check that.
I think we
Listen, thank you very much indeed. Joe, thank you. So it's not the #1 issue for voters, more so for Tory voters. So maybe the Tories, if they want to get back into power, need to do something about it. Thank you very much indeed as well, Robert. Brilliant book, by the way. The author of Bloody Foreigners, the story of immigration to Britain. Fascinating. I love having you on, ladies, and you. Thank you very much indeed. It's all we've got time for tonight. Plenty of food for thought, and who would bet against us all being back here this time next year, having the same bloody conversation all over again. Thank you to everybody who's been watching. We'll see you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye for now.
Dearly beloved, let us write. Yeah, careful. Who in Crane 2 exactly?
Rishi is like some kind of submarine prime minister. He isn't making the case. You're making the case here now.
I think you did kill these women.
No.
They need justice.
Well done.
You did kill them, didn't you?
Tell you what, we're all racist, we're all sexist, we're all homophobe. Bandalila.
History is littered with a long line of lovable but angry men.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore. I'm gonna give you a damn good thrashing. Finally, my stupidity pays off. I don't believe it.
But one man rises above them all.
What just happened?